Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Guten Morgen. Before we start this session, some explanations. We have only 1 hour time. Our plan is to have 30 minutes Q&As at the end, so I ask every speaker to be as precise and short as possible. I'm in an unlucky situation that I'm the timekeeper, so I might become very unfriendly in the middle and ask you to please make the point and be short. So please excuse if I do that. This is my role, and nobody's going to invite me again if I don't fulfill this role and if I fail here. For those online, please, if you have questions, use the chat function and announce that you have a question, and we will invite you to raise your question later. So we start the session now. Good morning, everyone here in the room and online. Just ahead of the 25th International AIDS Conference here in Munich, you are listening to the launch of the new UNAIDS report, The Urgency of Now, AIDS at a Crossroads. AIDS am Scheideweg in German. It's a political leader's decision whether AIDS is ended as a public health threat by 2030 or not. My name is Peter Wiesner. I work for Action Against AIDS Germany. I'm working for 30 years now within the HIV field. Some consider me as an HIV activist. I'm HIV positive myself. I'm a gay man. And I'm in a very lucky position because I live in a country where treatment is available, where there's no discrimination. I have a doctor who is gay as well. I can go to him. I can discuss with him anything related to my health that I want without any discrimination. This is a lucky position because I know there are certain countries where I would be put in jail if I say that, and I would be ridiculed and treated badly. And this is, of course, not right. And I'm pretty much aware that 1/4 of people living with HIV and AIDS are not in such a lucky position that I am. Those people that don't have access to HIV treatment, 1/4. And this is what inequality is all about. And this is not right. We have to change that. We are at a crossroads now. Being so lucky and privileged, I have to praise and say thank you to my government that did anything possible in the HIV response to integrate people living with HIV, to talk about and discuss discrimination and fight against that, to secure treatment in all possible ways. Germany is perceived as a global health champion, and there are good reasons to sort of say that. And of course, now a however comes. However, this might change. We are at a crossroads. I was really shocked to hear a couple of days ago when the budget decisions and proposals were discussed and published in the federal government of Germany. The federal government is planning cuts in billions, and the Ministry of Development and Cooperation and the Foreign Ministry are hardest hit. And they have the highest budgets for development and humanitarian aid. All this might have an impact on Germany's future contribution to the global fund, to the fight against HIV, to the global fund, to UNAIDS. Chancellor Scholz is speaking today at the opening ceremony, and I really hope and I would wish that he says the right words and find an answer to that problem. We are at a crossroads, and we know that bold decisions are necessary to end AIDS by 2030. The time is now. So by saying that, I welcome now, I lost my paper, thank you. I welcome now Dr. Sharon Levin. You are the president of the International AIDS Society, to say some welcoming remarks on behalf of the International AIDS Society. And you have only 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to start by saying I'm extremely scared sitting next to you, saying that we're going to make sure we keep on time, and I promise I'll do that. On behalf of the IAS, a very warm welcome to Munich and to AIDS 2024. The International AIDS Conference expects over 10,000 people to descend on Munich this evening. It's an incredible opportunity to bring together science, policy and activism to have a real impact on the HIV response. The theme for this year at AIDS 2024 is to put people first. And putting people first means a lot of things, whether it's in the design of clinical trials or implementing new policies and programs. But more importantly, it's about getting to the end of HIV. We cannot do that without people at the centre of our response, and particularly highlighting the importance of human rights, discriminatory policies. These are the reasons why our progress is being delayed. Now, each year we anticipate the UNAIDS global update. It provides a critical snapshot of the global HIV response, and it tells us where we need to redouble down on our efforts. We're here in Munich, particularly because Germany has had an exemplary response to the HIV pandemic, as you've already heard from Peter, but largely because we're close to Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe and Central Asia are one part of the world that are of great concern. You will hear those data shortly, but it has one of the lowest rates of treatment in the world. Antiretroviral therapy is essential for people to live long and healthy lives and to stop transmission of HIV. And if treatment uptake is only 50%, which is what it is in that part of the world, then we are in real trouble. The IAS mission is to unite the HIV response, notably through large gatherings such as the International AIDS Conference. My hope is that we remember this conference as a turning point when the global community responds to the UNAIDS alarm to recognise the urgency of now. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dr. Levin, for keeping the time, and thanks for highlighting the situation in the Asian Pacific region. Thanks for doing that. And now I have the great honor to welcome Winnie Byanyima. And Winnie, you're giving an overview about the outcomes of the report. We are all listening to you now. Thanks so much for, first of all, inviting me here and being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Friends, members of the press, welcome. I know that President Biden is making news in the world, but you have chosen to join us at the launch of the UNAIDS Global AIDS Update. So thank you very much. The data we are releasing today demonstrates that the actions that leaders will take this year will determine whether the world succeeds in ensuring that we reach the end of AIDS by 2030 or we fail. The actions that are taken today will determine whether we reach that Sustainable Development Goal target. Global solidarity has driven extraordinary advances in the HIV response. 9 years ago, there were only 47% of people living with HIV on treatment. Today, that number is 77%, a 30% increase in the last 9 years. But right now, the world is not on track to achieve that goal of 2030. Global new infections are not declining fast enough. And in 3 regions of the world, new infections are actually increasing. That's Eastern Europe and Central Asia, the Middle East and North Africa, and Latin America. New infections are rising, not falling. Our report estimates that by reaching the targets midterm for 2025 and 2030, we can help 16 million people to protect themselves and stay HIV-free, which will cost some money now, but will save billions of dollars for health systems around the world. In other words, if we reach the targets now, we will save money. We need to do it now. The path to end AIDS isn't a mystery. It's a political and a financial choice. I'm going to highlight 3 important actions that are needed to be on that path to end AIDS. First, resourcing. Resourcing the global HIV response adequately. There's a wide funding gap that's holding back the HIV response in low and middle income countries. The AIDS response is short of $9.5 billion every year. Now, if you think that's a lot of money, and indeed, some of the donors who have been supporting the response are now saying that they can't afford it. But it has been estimated that the warring parties in one war in Ukraine have spent over $500 billion since the war started 2 years ago. 9.5 billion is what's needed to get to the end of AIDS. And as our data demonstrates, the cost of not ending AIDS would be exponentially higher than the cost of ending AIDS by 2030. What is needed to close the funding gap? 2 things. 1, to tackle the debt crisis. In Angola, Kenya, Malawi, Rwanda, Uganda, and Zambia, just paying the interest on their debt exceeds 50% of government revenues, total revenue collected. Half of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa are either in debt distress or at high risk of it, spending on average 3 times more to repay their debt, to service the interest on their debt than they do on health, 3 times more. Sierra Leone spends 15 times more on servicing its public debt than on the health of its people. So we need to get that debt restructured quickly enough for these countries to have enough money to put in their response. We also need the aid to be maintained to sustain the aid that rich countries have been putting in to help developing countries to fight the AIDS, to fight HIV/AIDS. The second action is to get long-acting treatment and prevention options to all people in all countries. Access to long-acting prevention and treatment could be a game changer. The recent trial results are unbeatable. Gilead has a long-acting injectable called lenacapavir that can be taken twice a year, every 6 months, to protect people from getting HIV. This could transform access for gay men, for sex workers, for young women in Africa, who could be freed from stigma and fear of being attacked for being seen having to take a tablet every day. But right now, lenacapavir is priced for people in rich countries. This kind of inequity never served this response. It was the capacity to bring down prices for the low-income countries, middle-income countries, that has brought us here, where we have nearly 31 million people on treatment globally. Calculations done by some smart people tell us that generic manufacturers would make lenacapavir not for $40,000 and more per person per year, but for less than $100 per person per year. Gilead and other patent holders of long-acting treatments and prevention tools need to grant generic licensing using the UN-backed medicine patents pool and make those generics available for all people in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. 41% of people living with HIV live in middle income and rich countries. They are not rich people just because they live in rich countries or middle income countries. We need to get the price right so that they can be served. Upper middle income is a label assigned to a country, but the people in those countries are deprived of access to the best treatments, are not themselves personally upper middle income. They are poor. If they are not included, women like those I met in the favelas of Brazil, or the gay men I met in Jamaica, or people running away from war in Ukraine, will never get access if the prices don't come down. So medical innovations are only transformative if they are available for those who need them. So the third action is to tackle the discrimination and stigma that is pushing most marginalized people away from life-saving services. There is a surge in anti-rights, anti-gender, and anti-democracy laws and policies in many countries. And this is generating fear amongst marginalized communities who most need HIV prevention, testing, and treatment. This is also causing fear amongst those heroic people who serve them, community leaders, health workers around the world. When governments announce that they are going to hunt for LGBTQ people as criminals simply for who they love or who they say they are, it's not surprising that those people are afraid to enter a clinic and get the help they need. To save lives, governments must decriminalize same-sex relations, must decriminalize sex work, must not use a punitive approach, a criminal approach to drug control. They must end the discrimination faced by girls and women that's driving the HIV/AIDS pandemic, especially in Africa. In sub-Saharan Africa, girls are 3 times more vulnerable than boys of the same age to HIV/AIDS. Why? It's a power issue. It's the gender dynamics, it's social norms, it's inequality in access to education. So we know the solution is the empowerment of girls through education and through challenging social norms that are harmful. So to protect everyone's health, we need to protect everyone's human rights. This is key, and it's a third action. So in conclusion, we cannot turn away from global solidarity. When of the 40 million people around the world living with HIV/AIDS today, almost a quarter of them are not yet on life-saving treatment. Can't. And half of these people not on treatment are in Africa. We can't turn away when every minute, somewhere in the world, a person dies of AIDS-related illness. Every minute. Every minute a person dies. Amongst those facing death are almost half of all the children born with HIV. Most of them in sub-Saharan Africa, because they are not receiving the treatment they need to stay alive and thrive. 76,000 children died of AIDS-related causes last year. They could have been saved, all of them. 1 in 8 people who died due to AIDS in 2023 was a child. We must right this injustice. We cannot accept that with all the tools we have for prevention, for testing, for treatment and care, when we are so close to victory, 9 million people to bring on treatment and to stop infections, that we give up that we let millions die and leave AIDS undefeated. If leaders today, political leaders, business leaders, if they take the path of solidarity, their legacy can be that of preventing millions of new infections, that of saving millions of lives, that's ensuring that people live healthy, full lives, and that we are all safe. There is no time to wait. Our report shows that the path is clear. It's the political will, it's the financial investment, it's the defense of rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Winnie, for reminding us on the financial gap, on the tapped crisis that we have, on the key populations, on the obligations of the shareholders and patent holders. Extremely important. And thanks so much for mentioning some of the key populations that are really important. So we're listening now to a video of a man that everybody of us in the room knows. So I invite Dr. Anthony Fauci, former chief medical advisor to the US President and director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Somebody has to put on the video now, please.
Greetings, everyone. I am very pleased to add my strong support to my good friend, UNAIDS Executive Director Winnie Byanyima, in her launch of the UNAIDS flagship report, the Global AIDS Update 2024. As she has mentioned, the response to HIV is at a crossroads. Even though the goal of ending HIV by 2030 remains in our sight, we must do more to guarantee that this critical role is met in 2030 or soon thereafter if we miss that time frame. As we all appreciate, countries are making enormous progress to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. However, there have been many challenges that have been put before us all that could slow our efforts. We must do everything we can to be continually vocal and proactive in supporting the program. Failure is not an option here. In fact, it is unthinkable. If we all work together, we shall meet our common goal. I, for one, will continue to work with all of my strength to make sure that we do indeed end the AIDS epidemic, and I implore all of you to commit to the same. Many thanks.
Thanks to you, Dr. Fauci. You're a true legend. Nice to have you here with us. So now we have another video, and I invite Archbishop Dr. Thabo Makgoba from South Africa to talk about the leader's moral responsibility to end AIDS. We are listening now to Archbishop Dr. Thabo Makgoba. Thank you.
As human beings across the face of the globe, we are interdependent. As UNAIDS data shows, we cannot end AIDS in some places or for some people. We can only end AIDS by ending AIDS everywhere for everyone. So, leaders, ending AIDS includes taking 5 urgent steps. First, don't cut aid. Boost aid. The HIV response has been an astonishing success story. Millions of people have been saved from dying and enabled to have lives of joy. Reauthorize PEPFAR, fully fund UNAIDS and the Global Fund, and maintain the bilateral programs you have. Second, drop the debt. Debt is choking the countries of the Global South, denying us what we need for health and education. Please let us breathe. Third, share medicines. New long-acting medicines that need to be taken only twice a year will be vital for enabling those currently missing out to be served. But companies are not moving fast enough or boldly enough to share the technology. We cannot accept an apartheid in access to medicine, in which the lives of those living in the global south are not regarded as having the same value as the lives in the north. Fourth, support communities as the frontline leaders in this battle. Communities know best how to fight diseases. Exalted officials need to be humble, and they need to exalt humble communities. Fifth, reject hate, choose love. This includes rejecting discriminatory and harmful laws like the one recently passed in Uganda. Laws that attack people who are different, push them away from life-saving healthcare, and thus these laws kill. But it is not just hateful laws that harm. We need to triumph over hateful hearts too. And in this, I especially include churches. We in the faith community have too often pushed people away with judgment and meanness. For this hard-hearted, we need to repent and commit to always stand up for all people, especially the most marginalized. We need to love all our neighbors. With AIDS at a crossroads, the path to victory is well marked. Take it. Boost aid, drop debt, share medicines, support communities, and reject hate. Thank you, and may God, our Creator, bless you. God loves you, and so do I.
Thanks to Dr. Archbishop Thabo, and thanks for using the word apartheid. You come from South Africa. It's quite a strong word, but we know what you're talking about. And as long as we allow that 1/4 of people living with HIV are without treatment, we have the right to use that strong language. And now I have the extreme pleasure to invite one activist from Namibia. And as you know, Namibia did abolish its anti-LGBT law a couple of weeks ago, and Friedel Dausab, he's an activist from there. And Friedel, you've been the person that was most influential. I hate to say that you have only 4 minutes. I would give you half an hour, but only 4 minutes. Please tell us your story, and thanks for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Guten Morgen. Thank you. I'm Friedel Dausab, a litigant in successful constitutional challenge at the High Court of Namibia in a case titled Dausab versus the Minister of Justice. The Namibian Constitution guarantees human rights and civic freedoms. I challenge these laws that criminalize me as a gay man, laws that my country had inherited at apartheid from the erstwhile South Africa as invalid and unconstitutional. The court in Namibia upheld my claim that these laws contravened my constitutional promise of individual pursuit of happiness, as well as my required freedom from unfair discrimination, as well as my dignity. They further confirmed that othering, stigma, and violence have no place in a post-colonial, post-apartheid Namibia. They did this despite the hate speech and anti-gay dog whistling from some politicians, faith leaders, and ethnic leaders. This was a success for our constitutional democracy. Our constitution promises individual pursuit of happiness and equality under the law, a hard lesson from institutionalized and legalized apartheid of our past. Strategic litigation, however, was the last resort option of our national equality agenda. But we had no choice after numerous attempts to engage our government and our parliament. I brought this case because I did not want to remain a not yet convicted criminal hiding from the law, or to be a social outcast discriminated in the place of work. And with my intimate partnerships, unrecognized by the law, after I had played my part in the struggle for our country's independence from apartheid. I am now 50 years old, but as I was coming out as a young gay man, I experienced numerous attempts at conversion therapy. My family and the pastors tried to pray the gay away. And this trauma made me feel isolated, depressed, and I became estranged from my family, especially from my mother. During my years of wandering, I was diagnosed with HIV at the end of 1999. I was only 25 years. And at that time, everyone feared AIDS. I faced further cruelty, stigma, and discrimination, but in another form. By the way, my mom and I are now reconciled, and my mom is now an ally, and the support I receive has been a lifeline in the past 2 years of the litigation. As a Christian family and followers of Jesus, our Christian values center on non-judgment, forgiveness, and allowing the will of God. These are also my family values. Multiple and intersecting forms of anti-LGBTIQ and HIV stigma and societal violence made me a public health and human rights activist. I never planned to become an activist, but life experiences shaped the decisions to help remove a law that remains one of the biggest impediments to ending HIV among the most marginalized communities in Namibia, and to help protect myself and others from harm. The existence of this law emboldened homophobes, bigots, to act with impunity and to violently exclude LGBTIQ+ people from peaceful coexistence. Our government itself made decisions that hurt public health, like refusing to distribute condoms in prisons because of this harmful and hateful law. Our parliament continues to drive an agenda of further marginalization and oppression of LGBT persons through a slew of bills now in front of parliament aimed at outlawing LGBTIQ+ relationships and families. In the same time frame, however, we witnessed in Namibia the heinous murders of 6 gay men and trans women as parliamentarians and MPs used inflammatory language against LGBTIQ+ communities in their parliamentary debates. Finally, as we celebrate this historic victory in Namibia for our constitutional democracy and human rights, and because LGBT people have a right to live, love, and to be in peace, this victory is but a small step towards our constitutional freedom to protect everyone's health. We need to protect everyone's rights, including LGBTIQ+ citizens. To the leaders at the Crossroads, we say, choose the path of public health, not the path of public prejudice and criminalization. To our fellow Africans who are fighting similar oppressive laws in Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, and elsewhere, to Namibians and members of the human family, we say, choose the path of love, not hate.
Thank
We
you
will
so
not
much,
rest until-
Friedel. I have to stop you now. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I'm playing now the bad guy. But I'm completely with you. I worked in the church for about 15 years. I'm a deacon, and by my own experience, I know that praying it away does not help. So thanks so much for your input, and thanks so much for the victory that you talked about. Very, very much appreciated, and please excuse that I stopped you somehow. So thanks so much for being with us. And with these words, I go over to, and now the most difficult parts come because the name is difficult to pronounce. So it's Nitaya Banupa, and you're from Thailand. You're a doctor. You have a famous father, as I know. You work in institution, and so you are the executive director of the Institute of HIV Research and Innovation in Thailand. The floor is yours, and now I have to announce the minutes. It's 4 minutes, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here in this room. I think that the UNAIDS report launched today actually proves that all of us can make history. And leaders can also choose if they would want to make isolated dates a thing of the past and prevent new infections or not. That's the choice. And I'm saying this because now we have the tools so ready to end AIDS. We have prevention options. We even have PrEP options for people to choose from if they have they can make their own informed choice. And if we can really bring down the price of that long-acting injectable cabotegravir, or soon to come the lenacapavir, these will play crucial roles in enhancing prevention and treatment uptake and persistence. Right? But we just need two commitments from leaders around the world. And the first is to support the community leadership to bring these tools to the people who are so in need of them. And the second is to get rid of all punitive laws that severely impede HIV responses. So two commitments. And coming from Thailand, I'm very proud of what we have achieved so far. We being the first in Asia Pacific to be validated for the elimination of mother-to-child transmission. We are very on track for reaching the testing and treatment targets by 2030. And we are the first country in the world to pilot the community-led same-day PrEP services, in which up until now, by last year, we have more than 82% of PrEP clients in our country receiving PrEP from these community-led PrEP services. So 2 decades of our research at IHRI has proved that we can only be successful in ending AIDS if we let the communities lead. And the UNAIDS report also proves that as well. But sometimes, our leaders can take a wrong turns. In 2023, last year, came in the new requirements from our Ministry of Public Health, not allowing community-led clinics to stock PrEP medications and not allowing non-government doctors like myself to do PrEP teleprescription for these community-led PrEP services. And this year also, the cannabis use in our country is being recriminalized. And the threshold amount of the methamphetamine possession for personal use has been reduced from 15 tablets to 1 tablet. So there are wrong turns. These are wrong turns which need to be corrected by leaders in our country. And then lastly, if we really want to be serious about putting people in the center of HIV service delivery design, I think we cannot ignore the need for integrated services. And when we say integrated services, it's beyond HIV testing and treatment. At least integrated services must include HIV prevention following the status neutral approach. And it also must include services for STIs, viral hepatitis, sexual and reproductive health, mental health, stigma discrimination, and human rights violations. These are all services to be integrated if we are going to be serious about this. So it is very clear that we must move beyond the HIV testing and treatment targets. And we must deliver prevention targets as well. Now we have the 695 targets, right? And we also must deliver the 10-10-10 targets, which will address the stigma discrimination, address punitive laws, address gender inequality and violence. And we also must address, this is very important, the 30-80-60 targets. I'm saying this every time because that's the only way that you can get the leaders to really support community leadership. And lastly, we must not forget about the 90 integration targets as well. Okay, so now that we are getting into the 2030, we're very near to the 2030. I think we need to call on governments to keep their promises and also to give consistent and sincere commitments. Governments must deliver on all the targets and not just the 95 targets. It needs to be all the targets. Governments must support community leadership and government must get rid of all punitive laws and aiming towards having the anti-discrimination law. So now it's time for evidence-based action. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your powerful speech and for examples from your country. It's just absolutely wonderful. And talking about the gains and as well, you know, the hurdles that you experienced. This is very real. Thanks so much. Ich habe die große Freude, Frau Dr. Sabine Dittmar zu begrüßen. Frau Dittmar, Sie sind die parlamentarische Staatssekretärin des Gesundheitsministeriums. So you're the Parliamentary State Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Health. You are delivering your speech in German. So in German it's much quicker. We have 4 minutes again, and then we start the discussion. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the inclusion. Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, ich sage zuerst mal herzlichen Dank bei UNAIDS für die Vorstellung der globalen Zahlen und auch sage Dank, dass ich heute die deutsche Perspektive hier noch darstellen kann. Der UNAIDS-Bericht zeigt uns sehr deutlich, die HIV-Epidemie ist noch nicht beendet. Zwar sehen wir seit einigen Jahren weltweit einen rückläufigen Trend bei den Neuinfektionen und auch bei den Todesfällen, aber nach wie vor infizieren sich global jährlich 1,3 Millionen Menschen neu mit dem HIV. Und mehr als 9 Millionen Menschen haben keinen Zugang zu einer adäquaten HIV-Behandlung. Und das ist nicht akzeptabel und deshalb besteht weiterhin gemeinsamer Handlungsbedarf. Die deutsche Bundesregierung unterstützt UNAIDS und die WHO. Die Bundesregierung stellt UNAIDS in 2024 6,75 Millionen Euro und der WHO als einer der größten Geber unter den Mitgliedstaaten bisher ca. 260 Millionen US-Dollar zur Verfügung, um global einen Beitrag zur Erreichung der Nachhaltigkeitsziele, insbesondere des Ziels 3.3, zu erreichen. Darüber hinaus engagiert sich Deutschland in den Jahren 2023 bis 2025 mit insgesamt 1,3 Milliarden Euro im Global Fund zur Bekämpfung HIV, AIDS, Tuberkulose und Malaria. Und der Global Fund ist ein sehr wichtiger Partner und ergänzt vor allem auch die Arbeit von UNAIDS in den jeweiligen Ländern. Es freut mich sehr, Ihnen mitteilen zu dürfen, dass wir in Deutschland auf einem guten Weg sind, die UNAIDS-Ziele für 2025 zu erreichen. Für das Jahr 2023 stehen wir bei 92, 99, 96 und hier in der Fachrunde muss ich das eigentlich nicht erklären, 92% diagnostiziert, 99% in Behandlung und 96% davon unter der Virusnachweisgrenze. Allerdings mit Beginn des russischen Angriffskrieges gegen die Ukraine suchten auch sehr viele Menschen aus der Ukraine Zuflucht hier bei uns in Deutschland. Und ich bin sehr dankbar, dass es uns gelungen ist, auch mit Hilfe von Organisationen wie die Deutsche AIDS-Hilfe, dass es uns hier gelungen ist, Menschen mit HIV-Infektionen aus der Ukraine in kürzester Zeit in unserem deutschen Gesundheitssystem zu integrieren. Einen wesentlichen Aspekt im nationalen Kampf gegen HIV stellt die Prävention dar. Und da haben wir seit einigen Jahren vor allem mit der Präexpositionsprophylaxe einen Gamechanger. Innerhalb der zurückliegenden 7 Jahre ist es uns gelungen, die Zahl der Neuinfektionen in der Gruppe der Männer, die Sex mit Männern haben, zu halbieren. Und die HIV-PrEP hat hier, davon gehen wir sehr aus, so wie in anderen Ländern auch, einen ganz, ganz erheblichen Beitrag geleistet. Wir sehen aber auch, dass die PrEP in Deutschland bisher nicht alle Menschen, die ein erhöhtes Risiko für eine HIV-Infektion haben, in gleicher Weise erreichen. Entweder fehlende Versorgungsangebote, vor allem in ländlichen Regionen, oder auch die fehlende Kenntnis über die PrEP als effektives Mittel der HIV-Prävention. Hier sehen wir insbesondere weiteren Handlungsbedarf. Transpersonen, insbesondere Transfrauen, sind hier eine ganz besonders vulnerable Gruppe, und wir sehen in Städten, in denen es spezifische Angebote gibt, zum Beispiel Berlin oder auch Hamburg, dass wir hier sehr viel mehr Transpersonen erreichen können, und deshalb muss auch dieses Angebot ausgeweitet werden. Eine weitere vulnerable Gruppe mit erhöhtem Risiko für eine HIV-Infektion ist die Gruppe der Drogenkonsumenten. Und auch hier haben wir in Deutschland zwar auf niedrigem Niveau, aber trotzdem einen steigenden Trend bei den HIV-Neuinfektionen. Es bleibt deshalb nach wie vor eine sehr große Herausforderung, diese Gruppe zu erreichen, zumal sich auch Konsumverhalten ändert und damit einhergehend auch das Infektionsrisiko steigt. Und letztlich ist ein wesentlicher Schlüsselfaktor für die Bekämpfung der Epidemie in Deutschland und weltweit die Bekämpfung von Diskriminierung und Stigmatisierung der Menschen, die mit einer HIV-Infektion leben oder ein erhöhtes Infektionsrisiko haben. Und da hat die Bundesregierung mit Änderung des Transfusionsgesetzes die Diskriminierung von schwulen und bisexuellen Männern sowie transgeschlechtlichen Menschen bei der Blutspende endlich abgeschafft. Außerdem haben wir, die Bundesregierung, die Arbeitgebererklärung der Deutschen AIDS-Hilfe gezeichnet. In der Erklärung beinhaltet die Verpflichtung, HIV-positive Menschen im Arbeitsleben nicht zu diskriminieren, ein respektvolles Miteinander im Arbeitsalltag zu fördern und weder bei der Einstellung noch bei betriebsärztlichen Untersuchungen einen HIV-Test zu verlangen. Ja, meine Damen und Herren, Sie sehen, wir dürfen in den Anstrengungen nicht nachlassen, die HIV-Epidemie zu beenden. Und ich bin davon überzeugt, dass wir sie auch weltweit besiegen können und besiegen werden, wenn wir gemeinsam agieren und dabei wirklich so darauf achten, dass jede einzelne Person ihr Recht bekommt.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dittmar. Dankeschön für den input, and thanks so much for reminding us on the important work against stigma and discrimination, and congrats to the German government that we are all looking so strong on that. This is just very much appreciated from my side and from us all, I think. So now we start the Q&A session, and I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you have questions. Of course, please mention your name and the magazine you're working or writing for, and of course those online are as well invited to raise their questions. So I've seen one hand. Do I have to give my micro away?
Hi, Kerry Cullinan from Health Policy Watch in South Africa. A lot of the countries that are most affected by climate change are negotiating debt swaps. Given that there's money short for HIV, and given that PEPFAR is in danger, particularly if Trump gets elected, is this something that UNAIDS might take up with the World Bank and some wealthy countries? I know Germany, for example, has bilateral agreements for debt swap for climate change. Is this something you could do for HIV? Thanks.
So who wants to respond to that? Vinny?
Okay. Well, thank you for the question you have raised. We are living in a world of holy crises. There are many crises. And all those crises demand resources. We're seeing declining resources towards health and more resources going towards resolving climate shocks. This is real. And then, of course, huge resources going towards wars and destruction. So in the aid budgets, we're seeing plateauing, not real increases in total volumes of aid. But within the pot of aid, the share that goes to health is decreasing. That is the situation we find ourselves in. And that's why this report is very important. We are saying the investment you need to end this disease, this gap of 9.6 billion, isn't a huge amount compared to the huge amounts going to wars, for example. We're saying if you maintain this, if you close this gap, you can end this disease. If you don't, you will pay much, much more towards more numbers of people that are newly infected that you have to keep on treatment for the rest of their lives. So we have a good business case, a case for investment. And we are saying to governments, keep the aid going, keep it at the levels it was, close the gap, increase it, and you will end this disease and you will solve a financial problem of the future. But yes, there are many pockets, as you say, there are multilateral funds, there are bilateral funds, but I'm talking about the entire, both bilateral and multilateral, the share for health is declining.
Thank you, Winnie, for that. There is the Debt to Health initiative in Germany. I don't know if anybody feels entitled to talk about that. I see one hand raised. I give the micro to you.
Thank you very much. I have the question in German because you do translate, and it's for the parliamentary secretary. Florian Samuel Berget, TWN, TWN Transworld News. Wenn schon Deutschland die Budgets aufgrund der Finanzlage einschränken muss, wie ist es dann europaweit und weltweit? Besteht da wirklich die Hoffnung, dass da die Budgets anstelle anderer Budgets für Kriege und für die zunehmenden Schwierigkeiten, die wir haben, aufgestockt werden? Und zweitens, ich war 7 Jahre Korrespondent in Afrika, Menschenrechte, Frauenrechte, Gleichberechtigung. Das ist die Grundlage, um überhaupt hier voranzukommen. Es sieht aber nicht gut aus, wie wir alle wissen. Welche Einschätzung haben Sie hier und was muss hier dringend getan werden und was kann hier getan werden von den Ländern, die Menschenrechte einhalten? Denn die Lage wird leider nicht besser und daher 2030 sehr fraglich. Danke.
Sabine Dittmar,
Ja.
can you respond to that, please?
Ja,
It's a
ich
difficult
kann
question,
gerne etwas zu den Zahlen sagen. Sie haben die angespannte Finanzlage hier in Deutschland angesprochen. Ich muss zum einen sagen, ich bin sehr dankbar, dass der Haushalt in meinem Haus, im Bundesministerium für Gesundheit, dass der stabil geblieben ist, auch was die Förderung für UNAIDS angeht in 2025. Da stehen die gleichen Zahlen drin. Zum Haushalt BMZ kann ich jetzt wenig sagen. Also allerdings habe ich erfreut festgestellt, dass im Haushalt des Forschungsministeriums gerade für den Bereich der globalen Gesundheit eine Mittelaufstockung stattgefunden hat. Das ist sicher sehr wichtig, weil eine Lehre, die wir gezogen haben, jetzt auch aus der Corona-Pandemie in den vergangenen Jahren, ist, dass du natürlich globale Gesundheitsrisiken auch nur mit einer globalen, effizienten Zusammenarbeit bekämpfen und besiegen kannst. Von daher bin ich dankbar, dass es bei uns im Haus gelungen ist, das Ganze stabil zu halten. Für BMZ, da würde ich Sie bitten, dann vielleicht auch draußen bei der Messe, da sind entsprechende Kolleginnen und Kollegen anwesend, da entsprechend nochmal nachzufassen.
Dankeschön. Winnie, you want to respond to that?
I'd like to add to what the minister just said. First, I mentioned 2 important aspects to this question of funding. There is aid that rich countries have been committing year in, year out for the last 25 years, helping developing countries to fight AIDS. And we encourage them to maintain it. Germany does well. Germany puts significant resources in the Global Fund, has been one of the major contributors. Germany also contributes to us, UNAIDS, to get our piece of the job done. And in fact, recently, slightly increased that contribution. We're grateful. But the bigger resources that go to the response are those resources the countries put in themselves, their domestic resources. That is why I took time to explain to you that these countries are today choking on debt. They've got huge debts and they must pay the interest on that debt and not default. And that is taking away resources needed for health, for education, for social protection. And those are the areas that are important for us to fight AIDS. So there is a need to restructure that debt, not necessarily to forgive it, but to stretch it out so that the countries have more to spend on the health of their people. That's why the Secretary General has called out for a restructuring of the debt to give space for countries to invest in the health of their people. But even over and beyond that, in the financial system, the reason why this debt has shot up like this, for example, is that interest rates suddenly rose when this war in Ukraine broke out. So debt multiplied by 3-4 times. This is not the fault of those countries. They are not anywhere near where the war is being fought, but they find themselves with their debt multiplying. Then, when they go to the market to borrow, they don't borrow at the same rate. A poor country will borrow at 4 times the rate that, say, Germany borrows in the same market. So there are inequalities in the financial architecture. So again, the Secretary General is calling for a reform of the whole financial architecture to make the ground level for the developing countries to be able to manage their development challenges. So for us in HIV, we are saying there's an urgent need to restructure the debt so that these countries can put money on the HIV response. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry, Peter. We have a question online from Sabine Dobbel from the German news agency DPA, and it's in German. So I'm going to ask my colleague Luca to read out the question in German.
Frage an Frau Staatssekretärin Dietmar. Es wurde kritisiert, dass auch Deutschland die Mittel für den Kampf gegen AIDS reduziert. Sie hatten eben Zahlen genannt. Könnten Sie darlegen, wie sich die bereitgestellten finanziellen Mittel im Haushalt im Vergleich zu Vorjahren entwickelt haben?
Ja, das kann ich. Darf ich? Ja, das kann ich gerne tun. Ich habe es den Vorfragestellenden ja schon erläutert. Wir sind also sehr dankbar, dass es uns, und ich kann jetzt, bitte ich um Verständnis, auch wirklich nur für meinen Haushalt hier jetzt im Bundesgesundheitsministerium für Gesundheit sprechen, uns gelungen ist, auch im Jahr 2025 die Mittel für UNAIDS, also 6,75 Millionen Euro sind es, dass wir das stabil gehalten haben. Es ist kein Geheimnis, dass es Veränderungen im Haushalt des Entwicklungsministeriums gab. Und da hoffe ich sehr, dass die zur Verfügung stehenden Mittel sehr klug eingesetzt werden. Ich will auch auf das parlamentarische Verfahren verweisen, weil meine Kolleginnen und Kollegen im Parlament da auch oft also sehr viel Geschick und Kreativität an den Tag legen, um hier wirklich also klug die vorhandenen Gelder zum Einsatz zu bringen. Aber wie gesagt, ich für mein Haus bin soweit schon mal dankbar, dass die Mittel für UNAIDS stabil geblieben sind.
Thank you, Dr. Dietmar. Dankeschön. We still have 4 minutes, so there's time for one more question. If there is one more question, there's still time. Yes, there's one. You have to speak into the mic.
Hi, I'm Marina from an AIDS news agency in Brazil. I would like to make a question to Winnie Binyama. So, Ms. Winnie, with the rise of extreme right-wing movements and moralistic policymakers worldwide, for example, in Argentina, Milei's government is responsible for antiretroviral shortages, putting the lives of people in risk. So, what strategies is UNAIDS implementing to ensure the global response to AIDS remains effective, inclusive, particularly for marginalized communities in development countries? And well, the extreme right wing is growing everywhere, not only in these development countries. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Winnie Byanyima, please. And I think we have 3 minutes left.
Oh, thank you very much. First, we have to understand what we are up against. What is this backlash? What we see is a well-resourced, well-organized movement that is anti-human rights, anti-gender equality, anti-democracy. And why has it gathered momentum? It has gathered momentum in reaction to also progressive forces coming together. We have seen that feminists who fight for gender equality have moved and embraced other struggles like LGBTQ rights struggles. They've started to be more intersectional. They are not looking at gender as binary through a lens of rigid binaries. They accept that gender is fluid. So they work together with the LGBT. They work with anti-racist forces. They understand how racism also plays in. And the more these forces come together, the more powerful they get at challenging privilege and the monopoly of power by a few people, men actually. So they challenge traditional hierarchies. And then certain people get scared and start using the lens of religion, of culture to justify and control power. So it's a power struggle. So what we see is that we have to continue organizing and bringing progressive human rights, gender equality forces together to overwhelm them. There is no other way. We have to challenge the laws that they hide behind, that exclude, that discriminate, that criminalize. We have to challenge the policies of governments like this recent one in Argentina that privilege the rich and the powerful and crush the poor. We have to organize. I'm an activist, you see. My solutions are always about building power of the people. That's what we need to learn. At UNAIDS, it's what we do best. We are on the ground, working with communities, working with feminists, working those who are fighting on the right of education of girls, working on those who are fighting the punitive laws. So we join forces and help people to raise their voice and challenge. That is the best piece of work I like. Yeah.
So thanks so much for to all of you. We consumed already 1 minute of the following session. I hope the colleagues are not angry with us. I have to close that. Thanks again for coming. This was super interesting for me, and we look forward now to a successful conference with hopefully some announcement from our chancellor at the opening speech. I'm very curious, and of course we hope that the engagement of the German government will continue. And I made it clear that we are on a crossroads, and Germany is part of that. Thank you. There are some reports, so please take the reports home with you. Thank you.
Ich habe den schon Foto. Yes. Can we do a photo with the
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the press conference on the launch of UNAIDS Global Report with a specific focus on Eastern Europe and Central Asia, a region facing urgent challenges in the HIV response due to significant political and financial obstacles, including backlashes in human rights protection and service provision in our region. I'm Armen Arajanov. I will be moderating today's session. I'm by myself, I'm a person living with HIV. I am openly gay, Georgian Armenian from Ukraine, currently based in Cyprus. Joining us today are our esteemed speakers who will bring their invaluable experience and expertise and commitment to the cause we are working on. Before it, I want to make some technical announcement. If you will need translations, you can use channel 1 for English, channel 2 for German, and channel 3 for Russian. Если вам нужен перевод, вы можете использовать первый канал для английского языка, второй канал для немецкого языка и третий канал для русского языка. So, we are moving to our speakers, and I will just shortly introduce them briefly. You have the short bios of all our speakers in your pockets and folders. Our speakers are Iman Murphy, UNAIDS Regional Director for Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the Asia Pacific. Anaita Vanesyan, Minister of Health from Armenia. Vera Brezhneva, UNAIDS Goodwill Ambassador for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Renowned singer, actress, and TV host. Ms. Yelena Rostokina, President of Association Answer Kazakhstan. And Hanna Dovbach, Executive Director at Eurasian Harm Reduction Association, EHRA. We will begin with a short introduction of our report with a specific emphasis on our region, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and then we will proceed to the part with questions and answers. So now I will pass the floor to Iman Murphy without additional introductions. Iman is UNAIDS Regional Director, and Iman will share with us some key findings of this report regarding the region. Iman?
Thanks very much, Amin. And firstly, I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for joining us here today. We have a critical opportunity that we are here in Munich and at the International AIDS Conference to focus on our region, which has not got the attention it's deserved and the support needed to help countries and communities respond to HIV. So as we say, the latest report, the urgency of now, AIDS at a crossroads. In Eastern Europe, Central Asia, we are definitely at a crossroads, and in some parts and in many ways taking the wrong directions from the crossroads. It's a challenge for us, and it's due to political and financial challenges. Since 2010, new infections and AIDS-related deaths have increased by 20% and 34% respectively in the region. In the region, a recorded 140,000 new HIV infections in 2023, predominantly in Russia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. Key populations, including men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, and sex workers, account for 94% of new infections currently. Only half of the 2 million people living with HIV are accessing treatment today. And with the viral suppression rates among all people living with HIV in the region at a very low 42%. This is far from what we need, but we do have some examples of countries where they are making great progress, and so we'll also hear about that. But why is it so difficult for us in our region? Let me throw a few ideas and we'll hear from our panel from different perspectives. Firstly, criminalization of HIV non-disclosure. Drug possession, sex work, drives our affected populations underground. They don't and feel unable to access services, undermining the response in the countries. Inadequate testing and treatment coverage persist among key populations, hindering effective prevention efforts. And lack of access of the new science that we just heard about, and we're hoping to see more of with the long-acting, of technologies like PrEP. These are the game changers that can make significant difference and also not just address the prevention, but the rights issues and the discrimination and help countries respond to these collectively. Urgent legal reforms, human rights protections, and increased resources are essential to halt the rising epidemic, to save the lives of our populations, and to achieve the 2030 goal to end AIDS as a public health threat. We need to see a focus on marginalized and vulnerable populations most affected by HIV. And increasingly across our region, this is including migrants and displaced people. We need to see support and to fund community organizations to provide the essential HIV services, breaking down the barriers of stigma and discrimination and allowing effective access to the services and halting the epidemic. Community-led initiatives are crucial in supporting vulnerable groups and ensuring their access to health facilities and services. The integration of community leadership into HIV services is essential also for reaching and supporting these marginalized populations effectively. The best examples are where this is happening. The limiting of civic space is posing an increased and new significant threat to public health initiatives, including those addressing HIV, harm reduction, LGBTQI rights, and others. It jeopardizes the sustainable responses to the epidemic that are being put in place in some countries. So our health imperatives are being affected by other efforts from within countries and in the region. Our regional leaders are urged to develop sustainable plans that enable supportive legal environments, that prioritize the key populations and enhance the community-led interventions. We can achieve the goals in the region. It needs the political leadership, needs the community partnership, and it needs the resources. Closing this funding gap and repealing the laws that criminalize key populations or behaviors are critical steps towards meeting the 25 targets and ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. Collectively, we can do it, and we'll hear from the panel different perspectives on the challenges, but also the opportunities to do so. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you very much, Iman. Thank you for outlining the critical insights from this report, and thank you for underscoring that we can end AIDS. There is a possibility to end AIDS by 2013, but only if reforms and that protect human rights and enhance resources will be ensured. Next, I would like to invite Anaïda Vanessian, Minister of Health of Armenia, to share some experiences from Armenians' experience in policy reforms aimed at improving access to essential services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And as my colleague mentioned, our region, I think, deserves more focus and more attention. And it's so nice to present success stories and also bring the gaps and the lack of resources and more efforts to eliminate the HIV, viral hepatitis C, and STIs. So Armenia, of course, continues its diligently efforts to end these diseases and in alignment with the UN political declaration. And of course, last year's being very turbulent and having many challenges, starting with COVID, then unfortunately full-scale war and forcefully deprivation of more than 100,000 people from their home places to Yerevan. So this is almost the 3% of our population, and we were able to bring these people to capital or other regions and help them to find their shelters. And of course, it was very crucial not to lose the possibility to also meet their health needs and first of all make for them affordable services for HIV or other viral virus diseases. So our first goal to make the services short-term affordable for them, and then to understand that we need to bring more resources for long-term services.
Armenia's strategy for elimination of these diseases is very focused on making equitable access to services, making decentralized services for everyone, and treat all. And our goal is to come to the 95, 95, 95. And I'm very glad that even though we had a full scale of challenges, we were able to make our scores better. And for example, for 2023, our scores we are reaching the targets of 75, 77, 86. Comparing to 2019, we had 84, 76, and 70. So we see that we are reaching more people. We are making affordable treatment in early stages, which is very important, also having better outcomes. And of course, for us, it's important to strengthen the whole health system. So not only the hospital care, but also outpatient care. And for us, it was important change of pathway for the patients to make more services affordable in primary health care. It means self-testing, it means ARV treatment affordable in their regions, not only in the capital. So all these improvements we can see that are bringing us to better targets. For us, it was also important from the perspective of human rights to change the legislation, and some discriminatory legal acts which were on place has been changed. And for example, the blood donor, now they can, it's for everyone the possibility to become a blood donor, or for shelters to be in the shelters despite the health conditions. So these are making changes also in the mindset of population and making these, stigmatization less and less. Of course, we have a lot of work yet ahead of us, and I cannot say that we have overcome a lot of challenges, and in terms of behavior, in terms of accepting, in terms of more bringing the services, all the services to people who need them, and they are more vulnerable and have also difficulties to access these services. So of course we will continue, and I'm very glad that with the help of Global Fund, with the help of UNAIDS, our regional office, we will be able to overcome all these challenges and eventually eliminate all these diseases in the future.
Thank you, Minister Vanessian, for your insights. Now I will turn to Vera Brezhneva, UNAIDS Goodwill Ambassador. Vera is well known not only for her public work as a singer or TV host, but she is quite well known for her activism and dedication to supporting people living with HIV, raising important issues and supporting women in our region. Vera?
Thank you for having me here in this press conference, and of course as part of international conference AIDS 2024, which started today. And now I was thinking that I started to be as a Goodwill Ambassador 10 years ago, and I understood from 10 years, 2030, it was far. It was a lot of years, but now it's so close. And of course, we don't have time just to, start to do something. Like we have to rush now in this state what we have now. But when I started, nobody knows with what we will face too. And this is war and humanitarian crisis, migration crisis, and also crisis epidemic of AIDS. And I'm sorry, I turned to my language, what I prepared my speech. Но мы по-прежнему верим, что возможно сделать еще, приложить усилия для того, чтобы к 2030 году у нас были хорошие результаты, и мы продолжаем в них верить, надеяться и работать над этим. И хотела сказать, что, конечно же, с первых дней моей работы меня поражал уровень стигмы во всем нашем регионе. И, к сожалению, именно общаясь с людьми, живущими и столкнувшимися с ВИЧ, я понимаю, как тяжело им приходится именно в этой коллективной общественной стигме, которую они сами не могут побороть. И, собственно говоря, в этом и моя миссия тоже. При том, что есть очень много информации, мы ее доносим, но все равно стигма, она существует, и она очень сильно давит, и общество медленно меняется, к сожалению, и это ведет и к изоляции, и к росту смертности, и к отсутствию вот этого прогресса, который мы хотели бы, чтобы был. И вот доклад, который мы обсуждаем сегодня, он подтверждает именно цифрами наличие этой стигмы и ее ужасные последствия, такие как в нашем регионе рост новых случаев заболеваний, рост смертности вследствие СПИДа. И это, конечно же, печально, но у нас все равно есть надежда. Наша надежда — это все мы. Все люди, которые помогают распространять информацию. И, конечно же, наши потрясающие активисты, которые работают в этом направлении. Я хочу сказать обо всех активистах, потому что я общаюсь со многими, поддерживаю многих. Но как женщина, женщины-активисты, которым приходится не только воспитывать детей, работать, но и отстаивать свои права на свою жизнь, на свое здоровье и вообще права быть женщиной вне зависимости от того, быть женщиной вне зависимости от того, есть ли ВИЧ в жизни человека. И хочу сказать, что когда 10 лет назад практически невозможно было найти женщин с открытым статусом. Да и, в принципе, мужчин, было не так много. Вообще, в принципе, открытых статусов было мало. И у нас были такие камерные всегда встречи, естественно, там без прессы, естественно, без каких-либо анонсов. Но сейчас люди понимают, что, открывая свой статус, они не только облегчают себе возможность самовыражения, но и, конечно же, помогают другим, являясь для них ролевой моделью, являясь для них примером, и также являясь, как вот в случае организации, ментором, для того, чтобы помогать другим. И вот эта менторская программа женская, о которой вы услышите потом следующего докладчика, для меня она является очень важной, потому что каждая женщина, сталкиваясь с любой сложностью, она чувствует, что она одна как будто бы с этим столкнулась. А женщина, которая живет, столкнулась с ВИЧ, ей кажется, что вообще весь мир против нее, иногда и ее семья в том числе. И вот когда есть кто-то, кто может не только понять, не только поддержать, но и дать какое-то напутствие, посоветовать, как быть дальше и сопровождать на этом пути, это очень-очень важно. То есть я считаю, что в этом у нас произошел большой шаг вперед. И вот сейчас действительно женщины играют большую роль в регионе и с точки зрения еще и защиты своих детей, и вообще активной позиции своей. И поэтому мне очень хочется пожелать вот всем активистам, всем женщинам-активистам, конечно же, продолжать be strong, продолжать двигаться вперед. И я как женщина, как активист, как посол, я с вами. И очень хочется попросить лидеров, чтобы лидеры не только слушали, но и слышали, и действовали в этом направлении. И только таким способом единения, поддержки, вовлечения и привлечения внимания, информирования общества мы можем приблизиться к нашей цели, которую мы запланировали на 2030 год. Спасибо.
Спасибо, Вера. Дякую. Thank you very much, Vera, for your remarks and insights. And as Vera has highlighted in her remarks and speech, the important role of women openly living with HIV in leading the response is crucial. It's crucial to support one another and support each other. Our next speaker is Elena Rostokina, president of Association Answer Kazakhstan. And Elena will share with us some experiences in improving women from key populations, empowering women from key populations, including those who use drugs and survivors of violence. Thank you, Elena.
I will speak in Russian. Sorry, you need your headphones. Okay, I start. Что хочу сказать? Как вы уже знаете, в нашем отчете, в отчете UNAIDS, есть информация о менторской программе. Чтобы понять, для чего эта программа нужна, нужно немножечко понимать контекст женщины, живущей в СВИЧ, контекст женщины, в принципе, живущей в Центральной Азии. Где место женщины в Центральной Азии? Это за мужем, внутри семьи, возле детей. Если у нее нет мужа, и не дай бог есть еще и ВИЧ-инфекция, то ей очень сложно понимать свое место дальше в жизни. И как вы понимаете, если изначальный контекст такой, то речи о развитии женщины, о развитии потенциала женщины дальше не идет. Если у нее есть ВИЧ-инфекция, или она употребляет наркотики, или принадлежит к другим каким-то уязвимостям, то тем более ей очень трудно понимать, для чего ей развиваться дальше, если общество, в принципе, это не примет, у нее ВИЧ-инфекция. Я хочу вам сказать, что я 15 лет назад, 16 лет назад узнала о своем статусе, когда пыталась поступить на обучение по программе обмена опытом в Германию. Меня не пустили, потому что у меня ВИЧ-инфекция. Сегодня, 16 лет спустя, для меня это было как бы крушение моих там веры, надежд, всего остального. Сегодня, 16 лет спустя, я здесь перед вами, в Германии. Мне дали хороший такой заряд на то, что мне нужно защищать свои права, отстаивать свою возможность быть там, где я хочу. И поэтому я хочу сказать, что именно люди, которые защищают свои права, которые лично столкнулись с этой стигмой, дискриминацией и всеми остальными нюансами, могут быть и работать в этом направлении. И поэтому не только правительство, хотя, естественно, они тоже нам очень нужны, без них никуда, не только врачи, но и люди, представляющие уязвимые группы, люди, употребляющие инъекционные наркотики, представители ЛГБТ, представители секс-работников. Быстро. Чуть-чуть медленнее, простите. Поэтому все представители ключевых групп обязательно должны быть в программах профилактики и лечения ВИЧ-инфекции. Иначе мы не достигнем того, чего мы хотим, конца эпидемии ВИЧ-инфекции. Я хочу также остановиться немного на нашей ситуации сейчас в Казахстане. Наши тенденции в связи с нашим географическим положением весьма печальны. Почему? Потому что совсем недавно криминализовали секс-работу в Казахстане. Сейчас идет тенденция потому, чтобы криминализовать ЛГБТ-сообщество. Есть негативные проявления в отношении профилактических программ для людей, употребляющих инъекционные наркотики. Я хочу обратиться к правительству Казахстана. Если мы продолжим такими темпами, то сейчас наши 3500 случаев в год будут расти. Расти будут ежегодно, потому что права человека и участие ключевых групп в профилактике и лечении – это ключевая позиция для того, чтобы покончить с эпидемией СПИДа. Спасибо.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for your inspiring work and for your dedication. Now I'm pleased to give the floor to Ganna Dogbach, Executive Director at the Eurasian Harm Reduction Association, EHRA. Hanna is a prominent regional activist that advocates for the decriminalization of drug use as a critical step to end AIDS by 2013.
Thank you, man. I will speak about more frontline, not crossroad, because our region really sometimes the politicians and everyone from us deciding in which side of frontline we are, unfortunately. And this frontline is not only about the war, but it's also about the criminalization and about the attitude to civil society. With the criminalization, you already heard that we are not among these 4 lucky countries in the globe who really do not have punitive laws against the drug use, sex work, LGBT, and HIV transmission. We are not. Post-Soviet countries criminalizing all not regular behavior, and people who not like the majority, how politicians see the majority. Totalitarian states want to have everybody in prison working for free. That's the tendency. And unfortunately, 30 years of our independences didn't give us a lot of hope. And in majority of countries, our key populations facing heavily criminalization. And it's always reflect in the discrimination, stigma, attitude of teachers in the school, attitude of police, and threatening on the streets. And of course, it's not letting people to get to the medical health services and to trust medical health services. On top of this, we have Russian war against Ukraine, and I will not give details on what is happening on occupied territories, but as in Russia, the all harm reduction and opioid agonist treatment is banned. So people on occupied territories of Ukraine automatically losing this opportunity of getting services. And of course, the situation with refugee crisis, humanitarian crisis, and crisis connected with the gender-based violence and war-based violence. You could not imagine, and we even don't know what will happen with all the blood epidemics after we will really research the situation after the occupation, the occupation of the territories. And in this moment, I want to thank all European community, all global community, and Germany specifically for supporting, for warm hosting of Ukrainian refugees and millions of people who are running from the war. And that's really critically needed for all of us in Ukraine and living abroad. And on top of this, we now have really very coordinated effort to make civil society not existing in majority of countries of the region. We are calling it very slightly shrinking space for civil society, but honestly, it's not shrinking, it's disappearing, and we expect more. And actually, the Kyrgyzstan and Georgia now already approved laws for an agent, which put all advocacy work, and in case of Georgia, even the providing health services and social services by peers, by communities, under the threat of being closed, and people under the threat of fines and being arrested for this work. So it means that all the peer work, community work, HIV response, health support to all key populations and marginalized groups will disappear. And it means that effective HIV response will not be possible in majority of region. We as regional communities, and we 5 networks of communities led by communities, it's ECOM, EVNA, and PUD, SWON, and our Eurasian Harm Reduction Association. We are uniting hundreds of civil society in the region, from Czechia to Turkmenistan. We united now in the movement called Rise and Decriminalize, and we are all understanding that without decriminalization of key populations, we will not move further in the justice and social and health programs. But in the same time, we started with the first communique, which is about shrinking space for civil society. Because if we don't have activists in the ground locally who will fight for decriminalization, who will build alliances with everybody who are in our side of the front with the values of human rights, values of human dignity, we will not stop AIDS in these territories. So if you want to join this movement, we will be happy to have you as ally. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanna. Thank you for your passionate advocacy, and thank you for doing so much for communities in our region. Now we have approximately 15 minutes, and I will pass the floor to you. If there are any questions, we will have the question and answer session. Please identify yourself and your media before asking a question, and we will have some online participants as well. There could be also questions. I see 2 hands. Should I?
Thank you very much. Kiri Cullinan from Health Policy Watch, based in South Africa and Geneva. Thanks so much for this session. I find it very interesting. 140,000 new HIV infections in 2023. What percentage increase was that from the previous year? That is question number 1. And number 2, sorry for the basic question, but it's been a while since I've reported on the HIV in Russia. I see that it's mostly in the 4 countries, but Russia, I imagine it's hard to get information there. But if you could give some indication, because I know back in the day, people with HIV, They had to go to special clinics. They had the folders stamped with the HIV. It was very stigmatized. I'm not sure whether it's still the case. So maybe someone could just talk a little bit about the situation in Russia. Thank you so much.
I mean, let's take a couple of questions because we'll get some specifics. Yeah.
Thank you.
Добрый день, меня зовут Елена Держанская, я представляю региональную платформу Юрусов.инфо, это официальный медиапартнер конференции. Спасибо большое за эту возможность. У меня вопрос к госпоже Аванесян. Спасибо, что вы пришли сюда. Вы в своей речи сегодня сказали то, что Армения сейчас находится на пути к ликвидации вот этого неравенства, да, и обеспечению доступа людей, живущих с ВИЧ, к сервисам, да, в том числе по профилактике, поддержке, уходу. При этом неделю назад я брала интервью у Жени Маэлян, она президент организации «Мир. Реальные люди». И Женя нам рассказала про то, что буквально неделю назад одному из работников этой организации, это работник равный равному, который обеспечивает консультации, ему отказали в операции просто на основании того, что это человек, живущий с ВИЧ. При этом цитата, отказ был примерно в такой форме: «Я врач, и я решаю, кому я буду делать операцию, а кому нет». Вопрос, считаете ли вы этой частью того самого доступа равного к обеспечению лечения и услуг? Знаете ли вы об этом случае и что вы намерены делать? Спасибо.
One more question. And we'll try.
Two more questions.
Two more. Three more questions. And...
Добрый день. Я не знаю, это может быть больше риторический вопрос будет. Меня зовут Зибату Джибаева из Таджикистана, и я хотела бы спросить, с чем связано как бы такой был прогресс, да, в работе по профилактике ВИЧ в наших странах и такой регресс последние несколько лет. Это массовое помутнение у чиновников или что-то? Что происходит? Можете вот мне сказать? Да, я не понимаю, например, что случилось.
Случилась Россия.
Случилась Россия. Объяснение только одно. Россия и ее влияние на...
Okay. Let's go by the process, but that's a good question.
Добрый день всем, Еркин Раскулбеков, Кыргызстан. У меня два вопроса. Ганна, первый к вам. Как обстоит ситуация с секс-работницами на линии фронта? Насколько мне известно, есть большая вероятность распространения ВИЧ именно вот на той территории. И второй вопрос, и Иман вам. Мы говорим о том, что из 16 стран, 4 страны, это 92%, Украина, Россия, Казахстан, Узбекистан, лидируют по заражению ВИЧ. И мы знаем, по-моему, Амстердам принимал глобальную конференцию, Канада принимала, вот Германия принимает. Есть ли такая возможность для того, чтобы и правительство стран, и сообщество больше обратило внимание, такие большие мероприятия проводить? Ну, я, конечно, не претендую на территорию Украины, России в данной ситуации, но вот Казахстан, Астана или Ташкент, Бишкек, я думаю, тоже смогли бы принять такие большие мероприятия. Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Armen. Good day to everyone. So I'm Julia Golub. I represent Alliance Consultants Ukraine and Virus of online regional platform as well. So my question actually related to the innovation technologies and telemedicine in particular, because in the frames of the war, especially in our region, the situation is quite bad, and it's very important to provide these healthcare services also to our key group populations, to our migrants, especially Ukrainians, as you know. So what kind of initiatives in the EEC region are implemented right now by the UNAIDS, or maybe you plan to? And one more question is related to mental health. So what kind of the projects and maybe partnerships you have in this field as well, especially to our migrants? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yulia. I think we don't have more questions as for now. We have approximately 11 minutes, and I propose our speakers to start reply. Iman?
Thanks. Firstly, we'll come to you on the specific data questions, and I asked Mary, who's our Director of Data for Information, to be able to be here, and she can give you some information on the specific countries, etc., rather than take time in the front. Right? But let me say around the trend of the epidemic, the new data, because I've been asked questions about the numbers changed in percentage terms. That's because better quality data has been provided. So actually our epidemic started at a higher place in 2010 for the region. And so whilst some have seen a higher number for the regional growth, it's come down in the sense that it starts at a higher place. So the curve is reduced. So 20% increase. Globally today, that's significant, and it's the worst that we've got in terms of numbers and in global. So our region is really not doing well, but specific countries, Mary can come to you in a moment. Let me go to quickly the conference. It's available to go to any region. The challenge is the cost of holding a conference. So this we'd have to talk to both the host country, but then which partners. So it rotates between developed and partner regions. So from Munich, it'll go to other parts of the world next. So we could look at in the future, but that would take quite a bit of work with a partner government. Telemedicine. I had the privilege of being in Armenia recently. The minister could talk to some of the examples of what they're doing there. We are seeing the innovations. We have even more opportunity, and that's why I talked about the issue of, for us with the long-acting injectables. There are always burdens and challenges of human rights. Somebody asked the question about access to treatment. I have hearing challenges. A doctor in Australia insisted I had an HIV test before they would treat me. If I had HIV, when I asked them why, they said, well, if you have HIV, maybe you wouldn't want the operation. So the stigma persists across the world. So we should be careful to not think it's unique to any one country or community. So just as an example, but the telemedicine, these opportunities to get around this stigma is incredible. And that's why the long-acting injectables for treatment and prevention are critical to the way forward for us in our region and globally. But we've got to get that price down, as we heard in the main panel just now. So, and the discussions for countries to be able to take that forward. So I'll stop with those. Mental health, yes, there's lots of partnerships and initiatives. The UNAIDS is not just UNAIDS Secretariat, it's WHO, it's the UNODC, a whole range of UN partner organizations working on different aspects. And so we've also got to keep in mind, as the minister was talking and a number of colleagues talking about, the intersection of different issues, right? We have to take a more holistic approach. We're never going to have such massive amounts of money for one disease, right, that we thought of in the past. So we need to look at how do we connect. So issues of both like the different types of rights issues that are being impeding the response, but equally when we look at the response to HIV, we have to look at other health conditions and how do we integrate in a public health or a primary health care approach. So we have that opportunity and to destigmatize. And this is lastly, U equals U. We need to talk more about zero transmission. And that will help people go into treatment earlier if they realize they can tell the community. And it helps the government tell the community that HIV is not what it was in the past. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Yes.
So of course, it's important to see that when we talk about the policies, the new policies, and the overall the efforts that the country is making are not yet the end point that we are there. So it's important to see that, of course, there can be some cases of discriminatory or stigmatized attitude towards patients. But it's important that the institutionalized mechanism for human rights defenders and our own place. And for example, 1 year ago, we have launched a new ethical committee, which is acting completely out of the Ministry of Health, and they are dealing with the such cases also. So we have a mechanism to apply and to have solutions for the cases when there are any kind of discriminatory. For us, it's also important to change the legislative discriminatory clauses, which make the overall things very difficult. So my colleagues were talking that overall the policies are not going towards more human rights, or these trends are not popular, unfortunately, in our region. But for my country, I cannot say that we are in a place that our policies are taking into consideration the human rights aspects, the treatment aspects, and making the prevention and treatment and other services more on place for the people, not only in Yerevan, in the capital, but also in regions. And we are using the telemedicine more and more, and it's not only doctor, but also doctor-patient telemedicine, which is also making easier access to better healthcare, to make easier the access and consultations for people from key population or from vulnerable groups easier. When you are, offline and bringing issues, it's becoming easier for us. So of course there may be some cases, but we are very keen to go for more accessible treatment and prevention and services, and this is our policy, and the numbers are showing this, that we have improvements, and we will work towards these policies in the future. Thank you very much.
I have a couple of answers. One, I haven't heard about the good improvement in the Russian harm reduction and working with key population during the last 10 years. And if you take Russia off the region in the statistic, you will see absolutely different picture, because 70% of new cases, it's Russia, and 70% of death new cases, it's people who inject drugs. The challenge in the region was this transition to the domestic funding, that the first which state will not fund, it will be a behavioral survey. So very soon after the international funding stop, we will not get information about HIV prevalence among key population. So it will mean that we will not know what is the prevalence and what is the real numbers. That's the big risk for understanding the epidemic among key populations, among people who use drugs, sex workers. Coming to sex worker situation in Ukraine, EVNA, Eurasian Women Network on AIDS, did research in 2015, but back then it was not such hot war as now. And they find out that the women in the near frontline, and especially in occupied territories, they are so vulnerable to lack of food, lack of electricity, lack of security, that they could give sex for very basic stuff. We all understand this is the real war. All the pictures, from the Second World War now worsened because the moral of soldiers and there are no control. So we are now only could indicate the problems with the gender-based violence and rapes and tortures, not only against women, but also against men, which is happening under the occupation and by the Russian army. But we don't have the access to territory to search it. The same with the drug use, because drug scene has changed in the occupied territories and nearby. The other question about the prevention programs for key populations in all the region, why it's going down. One issue that it seems like we were very optimistic about transition to domestic funding. So Global Fund was supporting these programs, and PEPFAR was supporting these programs. And very fast we say, okay, that's responsibility of states. But states who criminalize these populations will never put money to this. And we see it in Kazakhstan with opioid agonist treatment crisis. As long we want state, and state decided to support this program in this exact moment, a lot of forces, and again, this anti-gender movement, anti-human rights movement, they are raising and saying, we don't need it. Put these people in jail. We don't need them to be supported. And why we're saying Russia, because if the program of opioid agonist treatment or harm reduction is banned in Russia and they are okay, it's like А что так можно было? It's like permission to the state not care about the international values, not care about human rights, not care about lives of these people. And that's rather dangerous tendency, not only for our region, Eastern Europe, but also for Western Europe. A lot of politicians saying, oh, it's permitted now, it's okay. But we don't believe that it's okay. And with the digital technology, I guess that in the region where we don't have proper organizations and people do not have access to harm reduction information, for example, in Russia, there were plenty of very good developed harm reduction sites and information and counseling services, but now it's banned. All the sites are closed. So it means that we will need we have only one opportunity to give information to people. It's digital technologies, it's chatbots, it's counseling on the harm reduction and sharing it from abroad. The same with documenting human rights violations. We will need to do this from abroad to support people in there. And with mental health, one small point, mental health for people who live with addiction, it's always footballing by patient, because those who are treating addiction never care about all other mental health diseases. And those who are working with the mental health, they're saying, first you need to be clean and then come to us. And this is not right, knowing the problem of addiction, and especially in our region with the history of repressive communist psychiatry. So in our case, it's not only about integration of two different systems in the health, but for us, it's also overcoming the stigma and overcoming this past of psychiatry, who is not about the treating and not about people-centered. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We are running out of time. So if there is any remark someone from the speakers wants to deliver, you have up to 20 seconds maximum, or if no, I will wrap up and close this session. No. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you all at the conference.
Thank you very much for taking the time.